Propaganda and advertising are often treated as interchangeable terms, distinguished only by their goals, their context, and the tone of their communication. The first belongs to the political sphere and aims to influence opinions, beliefs, or large-scale behavior. The second is tied to the commercial world and seeks to promote the purchase of goods and services. Both rely on the same professionals and the same persuasive techniques, brutally simplifying concepts and appealing to the subconscious and to emotions rather than to rationality and logic. Everything is permitted in this field, where people are manipulated by exploiting ambition, dreams, prejudices, anger, and the fears that afflict humanity. I myself have been a kind of hidden persuader, having worked for years in advertising agencies as a creative director. I produced campaigns for television, print, billboards, and social media on behalf of my clients, without ever questioning the truthfulness of what I was communicating. Advertising is the engine of capitalism and the free market. It often portrays a falsified reality, where problems do not exist and happiness is just a purchase away. It does not sell you a bar of soap, but the promise of perfect skin or an exclusive lifestyle. In this video, however, we will speak only of propaganda, an activity as old as humanity itself, traceable in the earliest written documents and archaeological remains, from the ancient lands of the Chaldeans to the entire course of the Nile. Power has always manipulated information for political purposes, to consolidate itself and gain popular support. Official proclamations rarely correspond to the truth. A striking example is the famous Battle of Kadesh, fought in 1274 BCE. We have the official version of the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II, carved on monuments in Luxor, Abydos, Karnak, and Abu Simbel, and we also have the version of his opponent, the Hittite king Muwatalli, preserved on clay tablets in the Archaeological Museum of Istanbul. Both claim a glorious victory, which never happened. The battle ended without either side prevailing. We know this from the terms of the peace treaty they both signed, the earliest surviving treaty in history. Even today, heads of state, especially those of authoritarian regimes, are not inclined to tell the truth. Trump and Putin are the clearest examples of how oligarchs and monarchs of every age distort reality to their advantage through communication. This prerogative is interrupted only with the advent of democracy in 6th century Athens. For the first time, different factions competed for power in the Agora, the assembly of citizens. Politics was born as an expression of popular consensus, a consensus won through propaganda and expressed through the most sophisticated forms of oratory, theater, and art. Pisistratus himself resorted to myth, manipulating religious symbolism for political ends. During the Roman imperial age, propaganda became essential for the stability of the empire, through standardized and widespread forms of conditioning, coinage, monuments, statues, and literary works celebrating the deeds of the Caesars and cultivating their personality cult. Think of monuments like the Ara Pacis, the Column of Trajan, the countless imperial statues in museums across Europe, and the immense collection of coins bearing their effigies, found everywhere from North Africa to the Middle East, India, and even Japan. But the Christianity and made it a state religion. The promise of an afterlife, missionary zeal, charitable works, and, above all, the prohibition of pagan rites issued by Constantius II during a period of political and military crisis created the conditions for the rapid expansion of Christianity between the 4th and 5th centuries. Although divided between Arians and Orthodox, the Council of Nicaea in 325 not only resolved doctrinal disputes but also encouraged bishops to build hospices and shelters for pilgrims, the poor, and the sick. Constantine I, though still a pagan, ratified the council's decisions and institutionalized the church within the state apparatus, giving a powerful boost to Christian propaganda. Only Emperor Julian, known as the Apostate, attempted to separate politics from religion, allowing citizens to practice their faith freely. His premature death in 363 cut short his reforms, but his government allowed the Western Empire to survive for another century. He wrote philosophical works and believed that every religion contained a path toward enlightenment through unity with nature. Perhaps this is why Christians labeled him an apostate, portraying him as a renegade and persecutor, despite his lifelong tolerance. These are the poisonous effects of propaganda. As Joseph Goebbels, minister of propaganda of the Third Reich, famously said, "Repeat a lie 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times, and it becomes the truth." This is how fake news works. Falsehoods spread so quickly that corrections become impossible. To understand the evolution of propaganda, we cannot ignore the Church's ability to present a consistently positive image of itself, adapting to mentalities and customs over 2 millennia. In the Middle Ages, the Church became the most powerful spiritual and political authority in the West, legitimized by the so-called Donation of Constantine, a document later exposed by Lorenzo Valla in 1440 as a forgery, yet without practical consequences. In a church plagued by corruption, scandals, and popular discontent, and threatened by new pauperist heresies, Francis of Assisi emerged in 1181. After a mystical crisis during imprisonment, he renounced wealth, lived in poverty, and preached fraternity among humans, animals, and nature. His movement grew rapidly, attracting nobles, clerics, and laypeople. The mendicant orders, Franciscans, Dominicans, Carmelites, Augustinians, became the most powerful instruments of Catholic propaganda, active in communities, preaching, teaching, and combating heresy. With Luther's 95 Theses in 1517, Europe split between a Catholic South and a Protestant North. The invention of the printing press accelerated the spread of ideas. The Catholic response was the Council of Trent, 1545–1563, which launched the Counter-Reformation, censorship, the Index of Forbidden Books, the strengthening of the Inquisition, and the creation of the Propaganda Fide, still active today. Since one cannot fight an enemy without knowing his moves, the Church also created the first modern intelligence service, the Entity, considered one of the most efficient in the world. Its clashes with English intelligence, its attempts to depose Elizabeth I in favor of Mary Stuart, and the clandestine network of Jesuit priests hiding in priest holes are well known. In Elizabethan England, works like Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen celebrated the virtues of the monarchy and the emerging British Empire. But the most powerful medium of the time was the theatre, accessible to all and encouraged by the government as a substitute for the pomp of Catholic ritual. New theatres rose along the Thames, the Theatre, the Curtain, the Rose, the Swan, the Fortune, crowded by spectators of every class. The stage became a resonant chamber for national identity. Even Shakespeare, whoever he was, could not escape this system of patronage. His Richard III is a masterful example of political propaganda. It demonized the House of York to legitimize the Tudor dynasty. This is the world I explore in my novel John Florio e la Scuola della Notte, where the identity of Shakespeare, alias John Florio, is revealed, along with his encounters with Bruno and Montaigne, preluding the Rosicrucian manifestos and the creation of the plays that transformed England into a major international power. Shakespeare was not only a prolific playwright but a true innovator of language, narrative, and stagecraft. His psychological depth, his blending of genres, his use of Italian literary heritage, and his mastery of dramatic rhythm still shape theatre, cinema, and television today. His ability to intertwine high-quality entertainment with subtle glorification of dominant values did not end in the Elizabethan age. It continued and evolved. Shakespeare's cultural authority became a pillar of British imperial ideology and, later, of American soft power. Hollywood, during and after World War II, produced films to support the war effort and promote American values. Even today, U.S. agencies use cinema and media to shape global narratives. This is soft power, influence through culture, ideology, and institutions rather than coercion. But this narrative is now in crisis, challenged by China's rise and Russia's aggressive revanchism. The world is becoming multipolar. Trump's presidency, with its supremacist rhetoric, hostility toward immigrants and women, and admiration for authoritarian leaders, has further destabilized the global order. Today, no one has any doubts about his authoritarian temptations. That old bankrupt, with his hypertrophic ego, that great entrepreneur who, unique in history, managed to bankrupt his Las Vegas casino, a supporter of the Cosa Nostra and very likely the Russian secret services, managed to destabilize his country's democratic institutions and turned the entire world upside down, an accomplice of the Israelis in the genocide in Gaza and in the treacherous attack on Iran for his own private interests, today claims the Nobel Peace Prize. Propaganda loses all its power when it appears for what it truly is, and recognizing its manipulative intentions neutralizes its effect and renders it completely ineffective. We lived for years in the climate of optimism and prosperity of the Pax Americana, believing that history ended with the fall of the Berlin Wall. But Francis Fukuyama was woefully wrong, and our awakening seems to have become a never-ending nightmare.